Why Nation Fail by Acemoglu and Robinson. Chapter 13, Why Nations Fail Today. The authors explained how institutions cause poverty or prosperity. This chapter covers the following topics: how to win the lottery in Zimbabwe, a children's crusade, who is the state, El Corralito, the new absolutism, King Cotton, keeping the playing field at an angle, why nations fail. The authors continue with Zimbabwe's extractive institutions and the challenges of today's nations. Zimbabwe's extractive institutions and the challenges of today's nations. Zimbabwe's extractive institutions. Zimbabwe's extractive institutions, led by President Robert Mugabe, have led to economic and social deterioration. By 2008, Zimbabwe's per capita income was half of what it was when the country gained independence in 1980. The state has collapsed, and basic public services have stopped providing basic services. A cholera outbreak in 2008 to 2009 was the deadliest in Africa over the previous 15 years. Roots of economic and political institutions in Zimbabwe. The roots of many economic and political institutions in Zimbabwe can be traced back to the colonial period. The British South Africa Company's colonial expedition in 1890 led to the formation of Southern Rhodesia, a privately owned concession of the British South Africa Company. The 1913 Natives Land Act created a dual economy in South Africa, leading to a white-only apartheid state. Post-independence control and economic failure in Zimbabwe. Mugabe established personal control through violent elimination or co-optation of opponents. Mugabe took over extractive economic institutions created by the white regime, leading to rapid state employment expansion. The model of regulation and market intervention became unsustainable, leading to institutional change with the support of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. Mugabe's response to political control. Mugabe intensified repression and used government policies to buy support. He encouraged and supported land occupations and expropriations, leading to a collapse of agricultural output and productivity. The economic and political failure in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe's economic and political failure is a manifestation of the iron law of oligarchy. Extractive institutions fail to stimulate saving, investment, and innovation. A children's crusade, the rise of the Revolutionary United Front, RUF, in Sierra Leone. The RUF was formed in Sierra Leone in 1991 by armed men led by Foday Sankoh and Charles Taylor. The state collapse under Siaka Stevens and intensification of extractive institutions led to the RUF's invasion. The RUF's mission led to mass atrocities, massacres, and human rights abuses. The government also engaged in atrocities, massacres, and organized forced labor. The collapse of law and order made it difficult to distinguish between soldiers and rebels, leading to the disappearance of military discipline. Sierra Leone state failure and extractive institutions. King Cotton established extractive institutions to consolidate his power and extract societal output. This lack of order and central authority has been a common issue in many African nations due to historical delays in political centralization and the vicious cycle of extractive institutions. The Civil War, 1991 to 2001, was a typical example of a failed state, characterized by vicious and inefficient extractive institutions. This pattern of extractive institutions collapsing into civil war and state failure has occurred in Angola, Côte d'Ivoire, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mozambique, Republic of Congo, Somalia, Sudan, and Uganda. Colombia, a state of perception and challenges. Colombia is a democracy with a history of democratic elections. The civil war in Colombia is marked by violations of civil liberties, extrajudicial executions, violence against civilians, and civil war. Not all armed groups in Colombia are communists. The Castano brothers founded a paramilitary group, Los Tanqueros, to hunt down members of the main communist guerrilla group, the Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia, FARC. The Autodefensas Unidas de Colombia, AUC, formed a national organization for paramilitaries in 1997. Paramilitary control has significantly impacted Colombia's politics and society, with a significant portion of congressmen and senators elected in 2002 due to paramilitary support. Colombia's political and economic inequality. Colombia's political system is a vicious circle, with violence and lack of centralized state institutions influencing society. National politicians exploit lawlessness in peripheral areas, while paramilitary groups are left to their own devices. The 2000s saw a significant increase in paramilitary support, with Álvaro Uribe's victory in the presidential election. Despite more inclusive economic and political institutions, extractive elements like lawlessness and insecure property rights persist due to lack of state control and centralization. Argentina's economic crisis and the perplexity of the dollar. Argentina experienced an economic crisis in late 2001, with falling income, rising unemployment, and a massive international debt. The government of Carlos Menem adopted policies to stabilize the economy, including tying the Argentine peso to the US dollar in 1991. The El Corralito situation occurred on December 1, 2001, with the government freezing all bank accounts and forcibly converting all dollar bank accounts into pesos. The perplexity of Argentina. Despite being one of the richest countries, Argentina began a steady decline relative to other rich countries due to inclusive and extractive institutions. The country oscillated between dictatorship and democracy, with power highly concentrated in the Peronist Party. Argentine political and economic institutions, a study of Buenos Aires. Perón's labor movement was a political base in the 1940s, but was weakened by military repression in the 1970s and 80s. Economic policies and institutions were designed to deliver income to supporters, not to create a level playing field. President Menem's term limit prevented him from being re-elected in the 1990s, leading to a rewrite of the constitution and the removal of the term limit. Despite elections and popularly elected governments, the government can override property rights and expropriate citizens with impunity. Buenos Aires is part of Argentina, with the preferences and politics of the interior embedded into Argentine institutions. Democracy emerging in Latin America is opposed to elite rule, but its roots are firmly based in extractive regimes. The underlying active institutions make politics attractive to, and biased in favor of, strongmen such as Perón and Chávez. The new absolutism of the 20th century. The new absolutism of the 20th century was communism, promoting prosperity under humane conditions and without inequality. The Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 was a bloody affair, with Lenin creating a new elite at the head of the Bolshevik Party. The real tragedies were the Civil War, Stalin's collectivization, and the purges that may have killed as many as 40 million people. The economic consequences and human suffering were typical of what happened elsewhere, including Cambodia in the 1970s under the Khmer Rouge, China, and North Korea. Communist economic and political institutions were supported by active political institutions. King Cotton in Uzbekistan. Cotton is the most important crop in Uzbekistan, accounting for about 45% of exports. Under Soviet communism, all farmland was under the control of 2,048 state-owned farms. After 1991, the government introduced regulations determining what farmers could plant and how much they could sell it for. After 1991, President Ismail Karimov introduced a cheaper option: school children for cotton harvesting. The main beneficiaries were the political elites, led by President Karimov. Uzbekistan's elections and the Karimov family. Uzbekistan's first general secret election under Stalinist constitution was held under Karimov's rule. Despite the oppressive regime, Uzbekistan's development indicators are high, with school enrollment and literacy rates high. The Karamuk family and former communist Qatars have become wealthy. The Karamuk family's rapidly expanding tea interests took over Interspan's assets, representing 67% of the market. Egypt's economic reforms in the 1990s. Egypt's economy was dominated by state-owned enterprises since the 1954 military coup. Major business people were appointed to key government posts in areas closely related to their economic interests. The privatization of state-owned assets favored the wealthy business elite, or the whales, as they are known locally. Egypt's economic and political evolution. Under Muhammad Ali in the 19th century, Egypt underwent institutional change and economic modernization. Extractive economic growth occurred before the British Empire annexed Egypt. Extractive institutions emerged from the British colonial period, continued by the military after 1954. Economic growth and education investment were limited, with the majority of the population having few economic opportunities. President Mubarak's plan to establish a political dynasty was cut short by the collapse of his regime in 2011. Nasser's presidency saw inclusive aspects of economic institutions, but the state did not provide opportunities. This trend was also seen in Tunisia, where President Ben Ali and his family began to prey more on the economy. The economic failure of nations, extractive institutions. Extractive institutions are the foundation of economic failure in nations, preventing economic growth. The nature of elites and the details of extractive institutions vary across countries with different histories, languages, and cultures. In North Korea and Egypt, the tools of extraction were inherited from the communist toolkit. Egypt's better economic performance was a consequence of the more limited extractive nature of Egyptian institutions. Extractive political and economic institutions in countries. Extractive political institutions create extractive economic institutions, transferring wealth and power to the elite. Argentina's constitution and democratic elections function better than Colombia, leading to double income per capita. Political institutions restrain elites, resulting in poorer countries like Zimbabwe and Sierra Leone. Extractive institutions can persist even after state collapse, as seen in Sierra Leone since 2002. Extractive institutions have been present since the 19th century, rooted in Spanish, British, and slave trade regimes. Transforming extractive institutions into inclusive ones can solve economic and political failure. Breaking vicious circles and breaking the iron law of oligarchy is possible. Thank you.